Hi everyone, my name is Eliza. I'm a sociology and French double major. Thank you so much for showing interest in my senior independent study. My thesis focuses on this conservative social movement currently going on in France called La Manif, tous, which translates to the protest for all in English. This movement is against gay marriage and against the use of reproductive technologies and surrogacy for gay couples in France. I would like to start off by explaining how I ended up choosing this topic. So the fall semester of my junior year, I studied abroad in Nantes, France, where I stayed with a host family. One day when I was at their house, I found a pile of these stickers, which you can see on the right. Thankfully, I documented it and took a picture. So in English, this message translates to: use medicine and public funds to fight infertility, yes. Use them to deprive certain children of their father, no. At the time, I was very unfamiliar with controversies surrounding reproductive technologies and gay parenting in France, so I didn't really understand what was going on, but I knew that I was very interested in the implications of this political message and wanted to learn more. After discovering those stickers, I decided to do a little bit of research, and I found that surrogacy and other assisted reproductive technologies have been very controversial topics in France. So in case you're unfamiliar with these terms, surrogacy is an assisted reproductive technique in which a woman carries a child to term for another couple or a single intended parent and hands the baby over to the intended parent or parents after delivery. In the early 1980s, surrogacy was accessible in France to straight couples. However, the 1994 bioethics law banned surrogacy for everyone, and this ban still exists today. So a lot of couples who want to hire a surrogate mother often go abroad where it's legal. In other reproductive techniques, such as in vitro fertilization and artificial insemination, are only accessible to straight couples with fertility issues, so similarly, a lot of gay couples will go abroad where these practices are legal. And these topics became much more visible in 2012 when there was the first proposal for the Marriage for All law, followed by counter-protests. In 2013, the Marriage for All law was enacted. This gave gay couples the right to get married, obviously, and also the right to jointly adopt. Counter-protesters were against this right to adopt, but also were worried about the potential legalization of surrogacy and assisted reproductive technologies for gay couples using the slippery slope logic. So out of these counter-protests against gay marriage and against reproductive technologies for gay couples, several groups emerged, one of the most prominent and sustained group being La Manif, tous. And in my independent study, I analyzed speeches that I found on their official YouTube channel, and I analyzed images found on their official Facebook page. prominent themes I observed in my analysis is the protection of women and children. So many protesters and protest speakers claim that surrogacy exploits women's bodies and exploits them financially under the assumption that only low-income women would want to be hired as a surrogate mother and only affluent couples would be able to afford it, therefore exacerbating economic inequality. And on the more extreme side, we also see many protesters comparing surrogacy to slavery, as you can see in the image on the left. And on the right, you see an image of a doll in a shopping cart. This is actually a very common occurrence at protests. If you recall, on my first page, there were a bunch of women pushing dolls in shopping carts to symbolize the commercialization of children. And also in the video on my previous slide, there was a large inflatable baby with a barcode on it. So these protesters claim that surrogacy treats children as the object of a business transaction. And here are some protest posters that also have a facade of protecting women and children. And I believe that this presentation serves primarily to redirect the attention away from the people they are discriminating against, the LGBTQ community, and towards the people they claim they are protecting. So in other words, they present themselves as a social justice movement fighting for the rights of women and children rather than a movement against gay rights. Another significant theme I observed is the Republican imagery. Republican meaning pertaining to the Republic of France. So on the left you can see a flag that says Liberté, Egalité, Paternité, and this is a manipulation of the motto of the Republic, Liberty, Equality, Fraternity. And it is manipulated to be against families without a father, so lesbian couples who want to use assisted reproductive technologies and single women who want to use assisted reproductive technologies. And on the right, on the top, we have an image of Marianne, who is considered to be a personification of the Republic and of Republican values like liberty and equality. And on the bottom, on the left, you can see some protesters dressed up as her, as well as protesters dressed up as Gavroche, a fictional character from Les Miserables, who is a symbol of the revolution and of France as a nation. And all of this Republican imagery serves primarily to characterize gay marriage and reproductive technologies as anti-French and as something that does not belong in the Republic. Throughout my study, I observed several parallels between rhetoric of the Manif, tous and rhetoric of conservative discourse in the United States. One example of this is this phenomenon of quote-unquote reverse discrimination that I observed in speeches and images. So for example, on this poster it says Family Phobie Stop or Family Phobia Stop. And here movement leaders are co-opting the language of marginalized groups and using it to create a false sense of discrimination against themselves and against the traditional French family. So instead of using the word homophobia, they use the word family phobia. And I argue that this phenomenon is in reaction to a false sense of power loss and a fear of challenged dominance. So in other words, many of the people who support this movement are worried that their conservative and very discriminatory worldview is being increasingly contested in modern French society. And so in reaction to this fear of challenged dominance, they fabricate discrimination against themselves. And you may have observed similar rhetoric in the United States. An example of this would be white people claiming that they experience reverse racism. A significant limitation of my project were my own personal biases. I do not share any of the opinions of the people I was analyzing, and this likely influenced my analysis. And in the future, I would really like to better understand why this movement is resonating with so many young people in France. So as you can see on this slide, many of the images on their Facebook page feature young adults and young children protesting against gay marriage and against reproductive technologies. So unfortunately, I was not able to interview supporters or interact with them directly, but in the future, I definitely want to better understand why this movement is resonating with younger generations in France. This has been a very brief overview of my independent study. Unfortunately, I didn't have the time to cover all the nuances of these issues. So if you're interested, please feel free to leave any comments or questions. I would love to hear your thoughts. And thank you again for showing interest in my independent study.